Welcome to Your Dairy Checkoff Podcast from Dairy Management, Inc., where dairy checkoff leaders and farmers share real stories, strategies, and insights that grow sales and build trust for U.S. dairy. Let's get started.
Welcome to another edition of the Your Dairy Checkoff Podcast. I'm Scott Wallen with Dairy Management Incorporated, and we are in Arlington, Texas for the 2025 Joint Annual Meeting hosted by the Dairy Promotion and Policy Groups. More than 750 people are on site, including many dairy farmers from across the United States. We have a powerful lineup of speakers, including Dr. Oral Capps from Texas A&M University. Dr. Capps, welcome to the meeting. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for the invitation. Glad to be here.
Well, you are going to touch on a subject that we know many dairy farmers are interested in, dairy checkoff impact. But before we get into that, can you just give us a little background about yourself and your department?
Sure. I've been with Texas A&M since 1986, so I've got a few miles on me, I suppose. I currently run a center called the Agribusiness Food and Consumer Economics Research Center. It's a mouthful. We just call ourselves AFCERC. And with that, we do a lot of marketing analysis, demand analysis, forecasting. We work not exclusively, but predominantly with the private sector, like DMI. And we do a lot of checkoff program analyses, particularly dairy.
So what's the history with you working with the dairy checkoff to kind of examine that impact?
We have academicians around the country that analyze the checkoff. The 1996 FAIR Act mandated an evaluation of agricultural checkoff programs. I actually began the analysis in 2011. So we've been working on this for about 14 years now.
And I know you really zeroed in on four main areas. First of all, what are the four areas, and how do you determine what you want to examine?
DMI has four program areas, but the dairy checkoff actually focuses on fluid milk, butter, cheese, other dairy programs, as well as dairy exports.
Right. And those are certainly areas that our farmers care an awful lot about.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So let's go through each of the areas. I'd love to get a top-line summary from each emphasis that you looked at, starting with food service partners. What did you find with food service partners?
So food service partners involves three food service folks, Taco Bell, Domino's, and McDonald's. Basically, the way that analysis goes, we look at pounds in terms of milk fat equivalent that are generated by the food service agencies. We match that with the DMI investment, and then accounting for various factors, come up with an impact that the DMI investment has on the food service partnership. The bottom line, if you want, or top of line, is that it produced a net return cumulatively over the 2009 and 2024 period of about 3.5 to 1.
That's an amazing return. And I know that's one of those things we love talking to our farmers about, because any farmer in the country can go into a Taco Bell, a McDonald's, Domino's, and see their work on the menu. So it's great to see the return that you found.
Yeah, and maybe one can argue that return is a bit of an underestimate, because they're not the only food service game in town. And who knows, customers there could have been spurred on by the investment. We would have what economists would call spillover effects. Those weren't captured. There's no way of capturing that. But I agree, the net return of 3.5 to 1, solid return.
Yeah. Next area, again, near and dear to farmers, fluid milk innovation. Can you talk about what you found there?
Fluid milk innovation is very exciting. I like the term. We're talking about lactose-free milk. We're talking about ultra-filtered milk. We're talking about, milk products that improve gut health. The reason I like that is a bit of an excitement. It's really helped turn around per capita consumption of fluid milk. The investment actually took place for DMI going all the way back to 2015 to 2024. not getting into technical details, we weren't able to measure 2015, 16, and 17. So our measurement actually ran from 2018 to 2024. Similar to the food service partnerships, what I do, I model the impact of DMI. How do you do that? Well, we have to control for a lot of factors: price, income, whatever factors that could be influential in affecting the demand for fluid milk innovation products. And then, isolating those, we're able to disentangle those and focus on the DMI impact. The bottom line there, now again, this is over 2018 to 2024, the net return is about 1.7 to 1. Now, we think that's a bit of an underestimate because a lot of the DMI dollars actually began in 2015, 16, and 17. I'd like to think of it as maybe stirring the pot and continuing on. And if you were to look at a graph of the pounds or gallons, that is, coming from fluid milk innovation, it's been up, 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 up. And the actual contribution for DMI has gone the opposite direction. And if you look at the most recent return on investment, what I gave you of 1.7 to 1 was over that whole 2018 to 2024 period. The most recent investment, we see a healthy investment of about 6 to 7 to 1. When I say most recent, the last 2 years.
Yeah, that innovation certainly is an exciting thing for our farmers. Next subject is another one near and dear to farmers is whole fat science and research. Now, we have such a legacy through the Checkoff. National Dairy Council has been around for more than a century, and I know sometimes it might not be understood how much work we really do in this area, but we talk a lot about there's been 80 studies in the last 20 years on whole fat dairy and dairy foods. What did you find in this area?
Another exciting area. Principally when you say whole fat science, because that may not mean much to dairy farmers, but it's whole milk. Pretty much exclusively white milk and not flavored milk, and butter. Those two areas, butter has just been jumping off the page in terms of per capita consumption. And whole milk, along with the fluid milk innovation, has helped a turnaround in per capita consumption of fluid milk. So once again, it seems like a common thread here. Controlling for a lot of factors, taking into account the DMI investment. What did we find? Well, similar to the food service partnerships, similar to fluid milk innovation, DMI investment was a positive in terms of boosting volumes. And the bottom line for net return on investment was a whopping 35 to 1. Whopping.
I'm no economist, but that's pretty good stuff there.
Yes, that's very sizable.
Fourth area is exports. And our dairy farmers had the vision back in 1995 to create the U.S. Dairy Export Council through their Checkoff, and it has been a game changer for farmers. So I'm excited to hear what you found in the area of exports.
Exports are exciting as well. When you look at dairy exports, USDA, where most of the data come from in this analysis, they break dairy exports down into two groups. The first group is on a milk fat equivalent basis, the other is on a skim solids basis. When you look at the investments made by DMI, except for cheese, which is milk fat equivalent, most of the investments have focused on skim solids. So our analysis focused on skim solids, and once again, the modeling, which is the big black box here, that I do. When you control for other factors, we get a nice return cumulatively, and the period in question is 2013 to 2024. The cumulative return is about 12 to 1. Another solid net return. When I say net, that means we have to subtract off the investment made by DMI. So even when you do that, and that was consistent with the other net returns that I spoke about, very healthy.
I mean, all these findings show us we're on the right track with our Dairy Checkoff mission and strategy to drive sales and build trust.
It's a nice news story in the sense that I can't always say that whenever we do checkoff programs, we get comparable results, necessarily for other commodities. This is truly a success story across the board.
If someone were to ask you about the integrity and reliability of your work, what do you say to them?
I say I'm a third-party, independent, credible analyst. If my program manager, Lauren Burns, were here, she would say, we find what we find, and that's basically correct. It's nicer to give good results, but no guarantee. I'm not a hired gun coming in to say, look at this. The other thing I would mention that's very important to me, my work is replicable. In other words, if I handed over all the data that I had to other economic analysts, they should find exactly the same results. And the other thing that's important is that my work has been peer-reviewed by, ag economist. So, independent third party, credible, peer-reviewed, would stand up to review, and, no partisan politics here.
Not sure what else you need there. That's amazing that it's gone through such scrutiny.
Yes.
What's next? Are you going to continue to examine dairy or other checkoffs? Can you talk about what's ahead?
Sure. Currently, I've told other groups when I've talked with them, I'm sort of like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. If you want to know who the analyst is that's putting out these reports to Congress, not just these 4 programmatic areas, but to evaluate the effectiveness of the dairy checkoff. Dairy is such an important area. They're responsible for close to $50 billion. They're responsible for about 3.2 million workers. And even though the number of dairy farms is going down, they become more concentrated, and fluid milk is becoming the fluid milk production has been relatively stable despite the decline in number of dairy farms. Just such an important contribution to U.S. agriculture. I never envisioned working on dairy. I actually grew up in an inner city in Baltimore. You had to travel quite a bit to find a dairy farm. So I kind of married into that. Not that my father-in-law was a dairy farmer, but neighboring farms were, and I became fascinated with that.
Yeah, there's something honorable about working in agriculture for farmers, and those of us who work at the checkoff are so proud to represent our dairy farmers because we know how hard they work, and we are excited beyond belief to share your findings with our farmers, and it's been great to work with you. I'm going to finish with one question. Pretend I'm a dairy farmer for a moment. What do you say to me about your research? What's the one takeaway you would want me to know as a farmer?
Well, my name is oral, so I don't know if I can do it in 20 words, but I'll make an attempt here. The investments that are made are paying off, not just with the 4 DMI investments that we've talked about, and the numbers speak for themselves. But in general, when you take a look at the overall dairy checkoff program, where you include, importers, qualified programs, DMI, milk PEP, the program is just successful and has had a track record of success, not just in the 14 years that I've been doing it. One of my colleagues, Harry Kaiser, was analyzing the dairy industry before I took over, and he found comparable findings. We're getting into some exciting things now, fluid milk in particular, because we're beginning to see a turnaround. Previously, when you looked at fluid milk consumption, except for some seasonal variation, a downward trend. Well, that trend is beginning to be reversed now because of whole milk, organic milk, lactose-free milk, ultra-filtered milk. Those products would fit under the classification of fluid milk innovation. So the other thing I think that's important to a dairy farmer is, well, how good is it for my wallet? I mean, we can talk about returns 4-to-1, 5-to-1. We do this for other commodity organizations, and a frequent question I get is, where's my 4-to-1? Where's my 5-to-1? So one of the things that we have done since I've taken over analyzing the dairy checkoff is to try to make it on a more personal basis. So, for example, what would have been the all milk price had you not had the checkoff? And our findings, and I'm working with the University of Missouri folks. We have a simulation model that we work with to do these simulations, the what if, well, if we took away this, then what? About $1 per hundredweight. So, you may not see it, but if you did away with the program, you would definitely see it, about $1 less return. Per capita consumption across the board, butter, fluid milk, cheese, non-fat dry milk, up as a result of the program. Take it away, down. Another question I got from various people, how can you have a positive return on fluid milk when it's been down, 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 down? Now remember, you have to control for other factors. Yes, it's been down, 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 but it would have fallen off a cliff had you not had the dairy checkoff. And now you're beginning to see a point where at least it's leveling off. And again, who's responsible for that? The dairy checkoff.
Well, that ties in so nicely to kind of a mantra our CEO, Barbara O'Brien, now says, if not for the checkoff, who? Like who would be leading these programs we just reviewed? And it is the dairy checkoff that leads in these spaces to drive sales and trust. I cannot thank you enough for the great conversation today. It was very exciting to learn more about your research. So thank you for being here.
Well, thank you, Scott. I appreciate it very much, sir. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Your Dairy Checkoff Podcast. Want to hear more about how your checkoff is making every drop count? Head over to dairycheckoff.com or follow us wherever you get your podcasts. See you next time.